The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Podcast Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. Hi, I'm Don Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of The Expanse, where we will discuss the deeper layers and meaning of this TV series based on the best-selling book series by James S.A. Corey. Joining me today on the panel are Steve Nelson. Hi, Steve.
Hi, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks, Steve. And Father Michael Gossett. Hi, Father Michael.
How's it going?
Good, great. So, Father Michael, you're new with us here on SQPN, and this is your first podcast with us. So, I was hoping you just kind of introduce yourself, just in 30 seconds, to the listeners, who you are, and a little bit about you.
Sure thing. I'm a Catholic priest from Steubenville, Ohio, the Diocese of Steubenville, and right now I serve as a parish priest, a high school chaplain, and a vocation director. So I keep myself busy and big fan of lots of sci-fi stuff.
Excellent. Well, you're in the right place then, because SQPN is the place for sci-fi for Catholics anyway. So The Expanse is, like I said, both a great TV show and a book series. Right now in the books, they have, 7 books published, an 8th one coming out in December. And I think they said the last one is going to be the 9th one out in 2018. So that's the book series. And then there's a TV show where, kind of like with some other TV shows that have been converted from books, like notably Game of Thrones, each season is based on one of the books, loosely. I know that some of it overlaps. So we have season 1 is sort of based on the first book, Leviathan Wakes, season 2, Caliban's War, season 3, Abaddon's Gate. And that's where we are right now. We're up between seasons 1 to 3. And before I go any further, I just want to warn listeners, if you haven't watched seasons 1 to 3, we're going to be talking about everything. So we're going to spoil stuff. So if you don't want to be spoiled, pause it here, watch it. Pretty sure most of it's on streaming already. At least the first couple seasons are streaming on Netflix. The 3rd season may not be yet, but you can still download it in places. I think iTunes you can buy it. I think there might be other places as well, Hulu. But go and watch that before, if you don't want to be spoiled by anything. So that's standard warning. So have both of you read any of the books, Father Michael? Have you read any of the books?
I've read almost all the ones that are out. I think I'm too short of where they're currently at with all the books.
Oh, okay. And Steve, have you read the books at all?
I have not read the books. No, my first exposure was when the TV series came out.
Good. Actually, that's a good thing. Although I recommend the books, that'll give us some interesting perspective from someone who's watching the show, who's read the books, versus someone who's just enjoying the show as it is. There's also a whole bunch of short stories and novellas they did, which are interesting, just because the world that they've created is so rich. So let's talk about the setting, the basic setting. It's 200 years in the future, which, when you think about it, that's the distance in time from the Revolutionary War to now. So it's a pretty big span of time. Lots can change, and lot has changed. It's not a world in which we have already discovered faster than light travel, although as the seasons go on, we start to get a hint that maybe we will. That might be in the future, some type of faster than light travel. But they have this what they call a Einstein drive, which allows the ships to travel a little faster than normal, but still is subject to the laws of physics, gravity and G-forces and that sort of stuff. I really feel like that's one thing that sets this series apart from other sci-fi, is that they really take seriously do a fairly good job. It's not completely consistent all the time. Of this is when they're weightless, and this is when they're under G-force. I mean, do you guys have a sense of that on the show? But Father Michael,
yeah, honestly, that's it's one of my favorite parts of the show, and I feel like it came through well from the books. But just that, like, that space travel's painful, and it can kill you, and just that they're always thinking about the time and the G forces. It makes it like it's just so real. And I've never read a series this long or read a series this elaborate when it comes to that. Just like it feels like you're really there, and they capture that how hard it is to travel in space really well.
Right. Yeah. It takes months to get from, say, Earth to the asteroid belt or and beyond. And they really, although I have noticed, especially more recently, they do cut some corners with the time span. They compress some time span. Like things do get places faster than they really should. Missiles and things like that. But for the most part, what do you think, Steve? Just exposed to the TV show.
I think they do a pretty good job of keeping the viewer in the environment. I know that, especially with their gravity boots, their magnetic boots and things like that, they always kind of bring the viewer into what's happening, where they turn them on and they put their foot down and they're on the deck and things like that. I did notice a couple of times where they did some things that didn't seem like they were quite right, but I couldn't really put my finger on what it was. I was like, that just seemed a little off, but that's to be expected. I mean,
well, and especially I'm going to jump right to the end of the third season, and as they were in this zone beyond this alien gate, this interdimensional space of some sort, where the laws of physics didn't really apply. That they enter the slow zone, and it stopped ships short, which meant the ships and everything in them had inertia, and it had devastating consequences for the people aboard. And they showed that to greater and lesser degrees of yucky goriness, but it had consequences, and I do appreciate that. I mean, I love Star Wars, I love Star Trek, but really the space stuff is so fantastic that you have to come up with magical science to explain it all. Whereas this, they pretty clearly stick to the science, pretty closely anyway. So that was the first thing that really came to me. Well, the other thing is they've created this really complex. Well, I call it geopolitics in my notes, but of course it's astropolitics of the solar system. Instead of nation states at war, China versus the U.S. versus Russia, it's sort of a Cold War between the Earth and Mars and the belt. And each of these cultures is pretty distinctive, I think. They've done a good job, especially the belters. What do you think, Father Michael? What of the different cultures and how they've portrayed them? Does it come across pretty clearly?
I think the word you use, distinct, is just exactly it. That each one has like such a good particular flavor, and the way they think about each other really has a powerful flavor. That people see the Earthers as entitled and lazy, that they have this beautiful thing that they take for granted, and that they're this big power. The Martians, and kind of tied into like the name Mars, seem sort of militaristic, and they have this strong united front. They're going to terraform Mars. They're going to make this a new Earth. And the Belters is just this sort of I don't even know how you describe them. They're just the idea that they're humans who have become accustomed to live in space, and their bodies change and their language has changed. And I think that's the Belters to me are the most memorable part, especially in the show, that they invented that whole language in the show, and it elaborated from the books where the Belter Creole to kind of make them have their distinct language that's a combination of a lot of existing languages. And I think that's really powerful, that you see all these people from Earth went out and their cultures got kind of mixed up into this new thing.
They kind of reminded me of mining communities in California in the 1840s. They were these people that were brought together to do one thing, mine, and they sort of built that created the structure of their community and everything about them, and that's what brought them together and held them together. And it was really unique, and the language is really fascinating.
It's actually, it wouldn't surprise me if the authors, because I should point out James S. A. Corey is a pseudonym for two guys who wrote the books together, who are also executive producers on the TV show. So, but it wouldn't surprise me if they sort of based some of the Belters on those 49ers, the California gold miners out there. But the other thing that the Belters sort of remind me of is kind of like Palestinians or today, like Syrian refugees. There's sort of this downtrodden nation of people kind of thrown together by a common sort of poverty in like they're often being used as a group by Earth or Mars, the inners as they call them, the wealthy parts of the solar system of humanity, sort of uses Belters to mine the belt and to do all that sort of stuff. And it really comes across in their attitudes toward one another. You see that their attitudes toward the inners. I thought that was very interesting.
They really seemed like they were seeking their place in that group of three,
right?
Trying to get respect and on equal footing with Mars and Earth.
Right. They see themselves as they should have a place at the table equal to Earth and Mars, whereas Earth and Mars just sees the two of them, and just the belt is sort of something they divide among themselves. So you have that's part of the essential conflict of the show.
And their situation, it like breeds the sort of like the radicalism you see with the OPA, the Outer Planets Alliance, that their poverty and kind of the oppression they experience, it leads some of them to really, and especially as the books go on, strike out in incredibly violent ways. But you see where they're coming from, that they, especially like from a Christian standpoint, they react in terrible ways.
Right.
But they're just being used. And it makes me think about kind of just in our world today, of if you're all the technology we use, and like where the materials come from, that could be hurting somebody. And the same thing goes in the Expanse, that the people suffer because Earth and Mars need all the materials that come from the belt.
Right. That's one of the things I've seen news stories about. They talk about, like, say, our smartphones and all of the exotic, rare earth materials that are required to make a smartphone come from, in most cases, third world nations. And there have been exposés of the awful conditions for the people who have to mine these things, who they don't even know what we use them for. We're so separated from the conditions and the life of these people, and they're so separated from us. It's sort of, I think, the idea of what they're pulling out there. It also sort of reminds me of, this kind of betrays my age, of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was, or Sinn Féin, which was the Irish political party in Northern Ireland against the British occupation. That you have both a political organization that's semi-public and respectable, but then you also have parts of it that are, well, they call themselves freedom fighters, and other people call them terrorists. That sort of thing. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. But it's complex. It's not just the OPA, the Outer Planets Alliance, is not just one thing. Belters aren't just, you can't just put them all in one bucket. And I really, again, that's part of the interesting complexity of this show that they portray. That's sort of the environment we enter into in this. Then there's the MacGuffin, here's the match that kind of lights the story fire in this, which is the proto-molecule. And what has happened, and I don't know if the show explains this as much as the books do. Maybe I should ask Steve. Steve, do you feel like the show explained the origin of the protomolecules well or sufficiently?
Not in a way that I can really pin it down. No.
Okay. So, because the book, obviously, books, they have the time and space to do it, sort of explains it as this alien race millions of years ago would send out these probes, just like we sent out, the Voyager probes, that have this molecule on it. And when they reach a particular solar system with a particular set of circumstances, with the particular conditions, the protomolecule has the ability to transform anything it touches into something it can use into its sort of organic technology, alien technology. And we eventually figure out that what it's supposed to do is to transform land on a planet and transform what it finds there into a stargate that connects to this gate network that these aliens have created throughout the universe or galaxy. I don't think they're actually quite sure how far it can go. That's sort of how we get to that at the end of the third season. They figure this out. But until then, humans have discovered this amazing technology, this alien technology. And so what do we do with it? How can we turn it into a weapon or make money from it?
Yeah.
And that becomes the conflict here. Is we have dastardly corporate overlords trying to make a profit, and we have politicians and warlords trying to turn it into a weapon. And it sort of becomes this tug of war between people. If I have the protomolecule, the Belters will have respect, which kind of reminds me of nuclear weapons in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of the nuclear weapon of this thing. So it's an interesting, say element introduced into the story to kind of stir up the pot and get it going. But one of the things that comes up is that they use the protomolecule in certain ways. So in the first season, they introduced the protomolecule into the asteroid colony of Eros. I always mix up Ceres and Eros. Eros, which has tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. I forget exactly how big it is, but lots of people, which kills all these people. It in horrible ways. It converts them into this alien stuff. And we see this over and over again, that they use the protomolecule. So I kind of want to just talk about, is it, based on what we see in the show, do you think it's possible to use the protomolecule in a moral way in the show? Or should the protomolecule in all its variations just be destroyed? What do you think would be the moral case, the moral action to take here? I'll throw it to you, Father, since you are our moral expert on this panel.
I hope so. I think I'd have to side with James Holden, who can be kind of annoying sometimes, but he wants to get rid of it at all costs. And the fact that it ends up with the big Stargate at the end is almost by accident in the show. I think just you look at the ways that it was used, and the Mao Corporation experimenting on people, like you said, on Eros, and then as the story goes on children to make them into these living weapons. They don't know what they're dealing with. And he kind of has this mindset of like, if this puts humanity further out into the universe, that's all that matters. And it leads him to, they try to make him kind of sympathetic in the show, but he still says, okay, experiment on these kids, even when he meets them face to face. It makes me think of C.S. Lewis, the Space Trilogy. And that's the philosophy. One of the main villains in it is that whatever it takes, humanity needs to survive. It needs to go out into the stars, no matter what lines you have to cross. And that's how Mao's living, and just seeing the scientists who treat either all those people on Eros or the kids as just lab rats. So it's just an incredibly dangerous thing that they've decided we're going to conquer this. We're going to use it and know how to use it.
And even the Belters or the inner other people in the inner planets, they want to get a hold of it just because if they have it, I need to have it. Like sort of we need a balance of power, mutual destruction sort of thing. Steve, I mean, so this sort of has bearing on our own time and real world. This idea of the balance of power and mutually assured destruction. The churches often, popes and bishops have often said it's not a really moral use of weaponry or the weapons of war. It's not really self-defense if you to create weapons of mutually assured destruction. But do they have a choice? Do you think? I mean,
who has the choice? The Belters have the choice.
Yeah, and if you're the head of a nation, whether the Mars or Russia, and another nation has this weapon, do you have an obligation to get it too?
Well, I was drawing parallels when I was watching this to the early days of the Cold War, when the United States had nuclear weapons and Soviet Union was developing them ostensibly for their protection because they didn't trust the United States. And I see it as kind of, there's a parallel there where you can't trust the other people to use it for good reason, for good purposes. Therefore, we need to have it so we can counter what they're doing. So there's nothing moral about that, but it's fear is basically what it is: fear and self-protection.
Right. And the fact is the people, at least in the show, prove themselves. They prove that the case by being, untrustworthy, using it in bad ways. I mean, it sort of justifies, unfortunately.
Well, the technology is beyond their ability to understand what it should be used for, or how to use it, or how not to use it.
Yeah. It feels like they're using an analogy not just for nuclear weapons, but for any technology where we kind of say, a technology that's too advanced for us, or whether it's nuclear weapons or cloning or AI or whatever it is, that we're always in danger of inventing a technology that gets out of hand and that we can't control. I mean, so much of sci-fi is about that. Hello, Terminator series. That's a lot of sci-fi is about this idea of developing a technology that we can't control, or finding something that we can't control that gets out of hand when we try to control it. So
I wish I could quote the church document, but it talks about just that our morality or our moral ability hasn't grown with our technical ability.
Yes.
And something like this is just ratcheted up 100 times that we don't know how to use it morally. Maybe if they were perfect, sinless people, they could figure something out and it would be beneficial to mankind. But like you said, Steve, it's based on fear. And all the people that preach in the show or the books about, well, we have to have it to be safe, they then go use it to figure out a way to dominate the others.
Right. And there's a lot of backroom dealing that goes on in this show between various parties, and double dealing and backstabbing, which is always interesting. And that's part of it too. Is like you have this alien technology, and they're trying to harness it, but it's overwhelming. It's like it's almost a massive hubris on the part of the humans to kind of think, well, we're going to use. It's almost like, I'm trying to think of an amoeba finding a pistol and wanting to use it to dominate the other amoeba. It's like
example.
It's like this is an incredibly complex technology that can transform matter and bend time and space, and we're trying to use it to kind of like poke at each other.
Well, that's what I thought was interesting, is that this technology that they're all trying to manipulate has its own agenda. And they don't realize that until later, and it's like, oh, we're not in control of this.
Right. It's almost like if a nuclear weapon was self-aware and had its own agenda, and that's again another aspect of the show that I find fascinating. And it again in the books, they have this span of many books to kind of pull these out. The TV show, because of the limitations of the format, has to do this in so much less time than the books have. and yet I feel like they're pretty successful at taking this complex story and conveying it. Do you agree? I mean, did you feel like the complexity and the immense the expanse of the story gets its due in the TV format, in the TV show?
I feel like the books, you get a lot of character development and sort of you get in their heads a little bit more, and see what they're thinking and feeling. Especially the books are, each chapter is based from one character's viewpoint, so you really get to know, like you said, dozens of characters over the span of the books. And the TV show can't do that, but I think the actors that play them portray them so well and bring out all the little ticks and personality quirks, that they capture so much of what is spout out over pages and pages of books. I feel like those are the faces I picture when I read the books now. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right. I just remember sometime in the second season, I started to get lost about what was really going on. And it took me a while to get back on track again. And then the third season was just awesome. I loved it. But the second season was like, I've lost it. I don't really know what's happening here. And I had to go back and watch a couple episodes and things. And I still wasn't quite sure I knew what was happening.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm someone who has watched Game of Thrones, and despite its issues, and I haven't read the books, and it's interesting to be in that position. So I'm essentially in that same position where you are, Steve, where I'm watching it without having read the books, and sometimes I feel a little lost. I mean, that's another one of those shows where a million characters and there's plot lines everywhere, and in a book they can kind of you follow right along. And so as I have watched it, I haven't gotten lost in it because I've got the bigger thread of it. So it's interesting to see that perspective, and maybe and some of it comes down to, are the writers and producers doing a better or lesser job, at this particular point? And I feel like in the third season they really are doing a better job at it. They've really nailed it down, because I thought it would be really hard to pull off the third season, to be honest, and they did, and it was I think they did a good job. Father, you mentioned that the actors are doing a good job of portraying their characters, who are originating the book. So I kind of want to veer in that direction at this point and talk a little bit about the characters that we encounter. So the protagonist of the story, the star of the story, has to be James Holden. And as I read the book, he was a much older character in the book. I'd say the actor who's portraying him is probably in his late 20s, maybe. And the guy, I'm reading the book, I don't think they ever come out and say it, but I felt like he was, the way they portrayed him, the way he's sort of world weary, late 30s at the youngest, maybe in his 40s. So how does that work for you? How does it work for you, the James Holden, Father, since you've done it both, of the book versus the James Holden of the TV series?
Well, like I said, I think the face of the actor now is he's whatever imaginary portrait of James Holden from the books I had might have kind of been wiped away. I think I agree with what you say, that he comes across as pretty young to be so jaded in the TV show. Right. How long has it been since he ran off from his family on Earth? But I think the thing they do capture is the sort of, maybe it's a little self-righteous. He wants to do the right thing, and he's going to force everybody to do the right thing. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's him being kind of impulsive. And maybe that's more of a young man's trait too. But he just thrown out, we're going to tell everybody the truth, and we're going to broadcast this stuff, and almost cause a war. He's never out to cause problems, but he's bent on justice, and that's an incredible gift for him. And sometimes it really hurts him when it blinds him to the people that are around him.
Yeah, Steve, with Holden, he is he's politically naive. I mean, at best. I mean, he drives some of the politicians crazy with his stuff. But but he is an idealist in many ways. As cynical as he can be and world weary as he can be sometimes, he's sort of an idealist and pretty moral. It felt like. I mean, what do you think of those two sides of him?
That he's a realist and a moralist.
Well, he's sort of cynical. He's got this strong moral streak, but he's also kind of politically naive, and that sometimes he makes public announcements that others would say that's probably not the best thing to do at the moment. It's sort of truth at all costs.
Well, they found themselves kind of thrust into this limelight without really intending it, and I think he was doing the best he could.
Right.
I mean, he didn't want to be in that position, but that's where he found himself. And I think he was just doing what he thought was best.
I mean, he's sort of an unusual person, in any situation, sort of one of these things where difficult times, certain kinds of heroes seem to rise up. I always go back to, say, George Washington was a unique man of his time. Without George Washington, the whole revolution would have collapsed. We needed that particular guy not only to lead the revolution, but to be our first president. That sort of thing. And I think in this, Holden is that same sort of person that the times demanded a man like James Holden to kind of be there, to stand up and to be at the crux of it. He always seems to be in the middle of everything, whatever's happening. And a little of that's convenient to the story, but it's still, he always seems to, he doesn't always make the right decision, but it always seems to turn out right, at least in the end. So.
And as you were talking, I was thinking about the other people on his crew, and they're all very different, but they all seem to have their own sort of code of conduct.
Yeah.
That they live by, and they're all very different, and they're all, a little bit unpredictable, but they all seem to have a code that they follow.
Right. And so Naomi, who's his love interest, and she's a belter. So Holden is an earther. Naomi's a belter, and she has quite a lot of allegiance to the belt, and which at one point pulls her away from Holden, and they go their separate ways. And there's Amos, who's very attached to Naomi. Now, Amos, I think, for me, is like my second favorite character in the stories because of how interesting he is. Because he is a profoundly, at once, amoral character, and yet he has a code that he follows. And to follow that, he will do whatever he thinks is the right thing to do, including visiting extreme violence on people, or walking away from someone in need if it's almost like he's I'm never quite sure whether it's sociopathic or psychopathic, but he has something profoundly broken in him when it comes to morality, and yet if someone gains his trust, he will go to his death to protect them or do good for them. I find Amos a fascinating character. I don't know if you guys have any opinions on Amos.
He doesn't dwell on decisions. He just makes a decision and goes with it with no qualms about it.
Right, exactly. For him, life is fairly simple and straightforward, and I think as you look at him, I think he kind of looks at other people and wonders why they make things so complicated. I kind of get that sense from the character.
He's loyal to a fault. Like you said, once he gains your trust, you gain his trust, you're in, and you're in for good. And he relies on people like Holden and Naomi to kind of be his moral compass. That he's a man, like you said, of violence, and he's lived a hard life. And he's happy, maybe not happy, but very willing to use that violence. But he kind of trusts those guys, the rest of his crew, to point him in the right direction. And I just love, and it comes up again and again with Amos, that he's protecting the weak. And whether it's like a child or later on like Prax when he gets into the story, just that whole that he knows he's a violent man and he's done terrible things, that he'll use it for the people that he loves. And in that way, he's constantly loyal.
Right, right. By the way, Prax in the TV show is less annoying than Prax of the books.
Absolutely.
So Prax is a botanist whose daughter is one of the children taken by the Protogen Corporation to experiment on, and he's constantly looking for. And so, sometimes it's like, do you remember Michael in Lost, who spent like 3 seasons running around yelling "Walt, Walt"? Yes. And that was pretty much everything he did. And that's kind of how Prax came across a little bit in the book, a little less so in the TV show. So, excuse me. So my other characters from the ship, from the Rocinante, include Alex. And Alex, I feel like, is an overlooked character, but he's an interesting character. And it kind of highlights something. It seems Alex Kamal, and it highlights another aspect of the world that they've created, which is that when people emigrated out from Earth, by and large, most of the emigration didn't come from the wealthy parts, the Europe or most of Europe, anyway. Excuse me, or United States, but came from countries where you had better opportunities if you went out, from these countries. And so Mars was colonized mainly by people from Texas and people from the Indian subcontinent, whether it's Pakistan or Burma. I don't know. Well, Burma counts, but India. Excuse me, frog in my throat. And so you have this interesting blend among the Martians of this sort of ethnicity of Indian subcontinent and Texas. And so they have a lot of like Texas drawl and Texan sort of slang, and yet they all, his name is Kamal. I mean, you have a lot of these people who are from a different ethnicity. So I find that sort of fascinating world building. But Alex is a Martian who formerly of the Martian Navy, who also left under a cloud. A lot of all these characters sort of have come from a little shady background a little bit, and but he's the pilot, and I don't think he gets as developed as much as the rest of the crew. They do a little bit, but even in the books, he's not super developed. But my favorite character in both the books and in the TV show is Christian Avasarala, who is Undersecretary of the United Nations. So the United Nations is the world government for Earth. The General Secretary kind of is like the president, and she's the Undersecretary, but she sort of runs everything. Everybody kind of acknowledges that really she's the power behind the throne, and especially in the book, she's cranky. She's this old lady who swears a lot, and she's really kind of cranky all the time. A little less so in the TV show, but as portrayed by, I'm gonna butcher her name, Shora Agdashlu, who you recognize her, you've seen her in a lot of stuff. I just love this character. She's such a breath of fresh air whenever she's on the screen, and she kind of antagonizes people great. And so I don't know what how you guys think about that, but I really enjoy her character.
Oh yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I love the contrast. She dresses so elegantly and has such an important job, but just tears people apart. she gets the job done, and it is in so many ways like utterly selfless. Like she just wants to take care of things, maintain peace, as harsh as she can be. And her interactions with people like Amos, at least in the books, there's a lot of that, and especially with Bobby, who comes into the show as her kind of a Martian connection to her, that she just doesn't pull any punches. She calls them on their crap and calls them to do what needs to be done.
Steve, do you have a favorite character that from the show? Someone who you stand out, I really enjoy that character.
Well, I really liked the interaction between Holden and Naomi. I think that they they complement each other well when it comes to the issues they're trying to decide and what, the courses to take and everything. And I think they make a really good combination of characters.
Yeah, they do. That because their relationship is not without its bumps, without its problems, but it's not like over dramatized. It's not a soap opera. I do like that.
And right up there at the top, though, I have to put Bobby too, because when she's in the role of a Martian Marine,
yes,
it's awesome.
I was hoping you said, because I agree. Bobby kicks butt. She is really great. A Marine Force Recon, and you believe it. In the books, they kind of make her. She's supposed to be bigger even than she is on the show. Like, she's supposed to be physically dominating over others. She's I think Pacific Islander. So Pacific Islanders tend to have, like The Rock. They tend to be bigger. And she the actress they have playing her, Frankie Adams, is not quite that size, but she really, I think she carries herself with authority, and I do enjoy the character of Bobby. She
shows no fear.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. And she has a pretty straight moral compass, I have to say. There's right and wrong, and she's, even when Mars is wrong, she acknowledges it. She's not, her moral compass overrides her patriotism in that sense. I kind of like that about her. One character we haven't talked about is Detective Miller, who, as I mentioned before, we were recording, I call him the Schrodinger's cat of the show, because he's not quite dead, not quite alive. And so he's in the first season. He's a detective on Eros, who's been sent to find this missing girl, who's key to everything, key to the proto-molecule, and ends up falling in love with this girl he's looking for. It's a very interesting sort of private eye story, even though he's a policeman, but it sort of feels like a film noir, private eye story a little bit. And he's sort of classic in the way he acts, almost like a throwback. And then he dies at the end of the first season, where he's on Eros when that's the first season, right? I can never remember where it
flies into
Venus.
Maybe that's the second one. I think
maybe that's the second season. Eros crashes into Venus, and he dies, we think. But then he keeps showing up as a vision that only Holden can see. So Holden thinks he's either going crazy, or other people think he's going crazy. And he's being used by the proto-molecule to communicate with Holden, but he's still in some ways himself. And it's an interesting question. Is that really Joe Miller? Is it a simulacrum, like a computer simulacrum? From a Catholic perspective, I'd have to say, like, if it's not his body and it's not his, but maybe is it his soul? It's a very interesting dilemma. Is that really him, or is it not, or is it just a computer copy of an AI version of his personality with all of his memories? It's one of those science fiction conundrums that come up in things like Star Trek, where they murder people every time they use the transporter. It's not transporting people; it's killing them and creating copies. That's another show we can do.
Yeah.
You can. We're on the Secrets of Star Trek. We'll talk about that one time, whether transporters are killing people. So any thoughts on Detective Miller? Just that sort of relationship, that question.
I was definitely a big fan. In college, I took a detective literature class, and as soon as I started reading his chapters, I was like, my gosh, this is right out of books like that. Of he wears the hat and he kind of talks in a dated way, and then falls in love with the girl that he's looking for. It took me out of the story a little bit of the big sci-fi story.
Yeah.
But he's such a great character, and kind of going off the question you brought up, at least in the books, they really play up the proto-molecule using him almost like a computer program, because in life he was somebody who found things. Now, in death, his copy or whatever it is the thing that gets sent out to find something, and it's kind of just he's a channel for them to figure out a problem, whatever, whoever they are or whatever is going on. But he's another like moral character that he came from kind of a shady background and decides he's going to give his life even for this girl that he only really meets after she's dead.
Right.
That and sort of absorbs into the proto molecule. But I think he's just a great foil for Holden because he's not idealistic and he's willing to do some more questionable things in his pursuit of the truth. But in the end, he is after the truth.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good point about how he is that a little bit of that foil for Holden in that. So I want to switch to another element of the show that is prominent, which is that there is religion in this world of the Expanse, in the solar system of the Expanse. Not Catholicism so far that I have been able to notice, but we see both Mormonism. Is it Mormon? Mormonism. That's the right adjective. And this Methodist minister, Anna. So the Mormons show up sort of in an ancillary fashion with this giant generation ship. It's the largest thing ever constructed by human beings. It's being built at the Titan ship, the Tycho station around Titan, the moon of Jupiter or Saturn.
I think so. I think Jupiter.
Jupiter, I think.
Yeah, okay. I think I know that, but I gotta, I always second guess myself. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. They're building this giant ship for the Mormons because they're sending families, whole communities, this whole society of Mormons out into space to go to the closest habitable star system, which at the speed of the Einstein drive that they have, will take generations. It will be hundreds of years before they get there. Which, by the way, by the end of the third season, with the gates opening up, as we know, renders that whole mission moot. But what happens is that the Belters commandeer the ship, the Nauvoo, and turn it into their first and only warship, which they call the Behemoth, and then it becomes in season 4. I don't want to spoil season 4 for those who haven't read the books, but in season 4, it's still in that that null space of the gate, but so it continues to play a role in the stories, but it's Mormons who are going out, and I don't know a lot about Mormonism, but what do you think about this? What is it that's think is particular to Mormonism that will draw them to this sort of mission, Father? Or is it not particular to them, but maybe Catholics would do the same thing?
I did. I researched a little because I suspected in the history of Mormonism, they made that great journey to what became Utah, and that's why Salt Lake City and everything Mormonism
right
is kind of based out of there. And so I thought it's an interesting kind of a religious deep cut for the writers of the books and the show to go with that the Mormons who sort of fled persecution and conflict in the United States out into the wilderness, that now 200 years or more later, they're going to do that same thing and go off and start kind of this new world. And I just keep thinking of the scene. I think it's Miller is traveling to Eros, and he sits with like a Mormon minister or something on the ship, and
right.
They just have that kind of conversation about faith and like, well, God will take care of us as we go out there. And it's just an interesting callback. And it makes me wonder the writers of the books, what their religious backgrounds are, that they would pick that particular religious element to bring out in the future. Yeah,
that's an interesting thought. I should have dug into their background and see if maybe one of them is Mormon. I know that the sci-fi writer Orson Scott Card, that came too quick. Orson Scott Card is Mormon, and that actually has played an element in his worldview has played an element in some of the books he's written. He wrote Ender's Game
Mm-hmm.
and some other things. And it's an element. If you didn't know he was Mormon, it wouldn't make a difference. But when you know that he's Mormon, then you understand. You know a little bit about Mormonism, then you understand why that played a role in the books. And I think that might be the case here. That it did. And so the other religious character, which we see a lot more of, and we, in fact, in the TV series, is introduced much sooner than in the book, and has a bigger role initially, is this Anna Volovodov.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I should know it. My grandfather was Russian. I should be able to say these names. But the for some reason I kept thinking that in the book she was Orthodox, Russian Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking online in Wikipedia, and it was saying that she's Methodist. In the TV series, she's Methodist. I know that they've changed it to be Methodist, or they've said that she's Methodist. So now I'm second guessing whether I misread the book or someone messed up Wikipedia, which would not be unheard of. But anyway, they introduce her as a former confidant of the UN Secretary General. She used to write his speeches when he was a young politician, and they have they left under bad circumstances. I think used one of her speeches to do something politically immoral, something that offended her sense of right and wrong, at least. And but he calls her back in when they have this crisis with the protomolecule and with Mars to kind of help him write speeches into his public image. She helps expose the guy who's within the Secretary General's office, who's manipulating him for his own purposes to cause a war. And then in the season 3, her role changes to what it was in the book, which is to travel as as one of his emissaries out to this new gate, Stargate, the protomolecule gate, as part of the mission to go out and examine it. So they send scientists, but they also send philosophers and artists, and it's kind of interesting that they would do that. Just that idea that they would send religious leaders and philosophers and artists, and apparently they send a Kardashian of sort of a woman.
Yeah.
But as well as the scientists and the military, of course, out to examine this alien gate, which in one way kind of it says to me that they're a little more advanced than we are, more forward looking than we are. Because I don't. If that happened today, I don't see our government sending philosophers and poets and religious leaders to go examine an alien artifact, somewhere on Earth. They would send military and scientists, and that's about it. So what do you think of that? I mean, if they were asking for volunteers, would you raise your hand, Father Michael?
I would be tempted, I think. She's a great character in the show. I think she really stood out to me in the show. That actress, Elizabeth Mitchell, is in a lot of really good stuff. I loved her in Lost, and Revolution was an interesting show she was on.
Yep.
But so she plays that really well as a sympathetic sort of character. But yeah, it shows this sort of like interesting inclusivity of the future that even though they have space travel and all this stuff, where we, especially in science fiction, you think about sort of the Star Trek mode that religions, we've evolved past that.
Right.
But it seems to have a prominent place, and she seems to have a prominent place in the world. But I think especially in her character that she kind of walks these halls of power, but she really cares for people. And especially on the ship in the third season, she's always like taking care of people and looking for people when people are suffering. She reaches out to them. And her faith kind of carries through this. I mean, it's crazy. Like you said, the incredible accident when their ship suddenly slows down and lots of people get seriously injured. In the show, she reaches out to Clarissa Mao, who's trying to sabotage everything.
Mm-hmm.
She cares for people, and it presents like a really beautiful like Christian witness that she's taken her faith into this bizarre alien situation, and even under like the worst circumstances, she's really interested in bringing charity and just maintaining good things. Yeah.
And the way she practices her faith is not it's not very in your face.
Mm-hmm.
They, from my point of view, if they could be more explicit about the Christian content, which is no surprise that the surprise is that it's there at all, frankly,
Yeah.
in Hollywood. But but that said, like there was a small subplot in season 3 where she was on this ship and this one officer committed suicide, and she really she dove into she knew her role. Her role was to console the other crew members, to really get people who are focusing on other stuff to really say no, we need to stop, and to memorialize this person and help people deal with with this loss that they've suffered in this, what happened with this guy. And because I think, if I remember correctly, he killed himself because it's sort of representative of how some people would deal with the world-changing reality of alien life and alien. He couldn't deal with this world, what the world had become, and so she is this incredibly sympathetic character who wants to care for everyone, and I'm happy that they have a character like that in this. It's not all idealistic heroes and warriors, but you have a person like this, and I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, me too.
Steve, do you have any thoughts on these, whether it's the Mormon, the little bit of Mormonism that's in it with the Nauvoo, or the Anna, the Methodist minister, who that gets introduced in these 2 seasons that we've seen her.
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned it there at the end that the typical sci-fi tends to overlook those aspects, and to have this, I don't want to call it a holdover from previous Earth culture, but that it still has meaning, but it also shows the human side to things that you kind of miss sometimes, that aspect of it, and it's in a lot of science fiction where it's all about the science.
Right. Yes, and that's the nice thing is, like, as I was saying before, like they send these people out to the gate, who are poets and philosophers and religious leaders and whatnot. It's not just a scientific moment. So I think that's unless you guys have more. Actually, I mean, the only thing to mention is we didn't really talk too much about the grand mystery of who, like the gate builders, the creators of the protomolecule themselves are missing. And I think we've actually lost Steve, who we lost a couple times. So we'll finish without him because we just got a couple minutes left. But there's this mystery of the lost gate builders, and maybe in this sort of revealed at the very end that somebody killed the people who are capable of building these gates, and whether that's going to come to play, we haven't even seen that in the books yet, where whether that's going to be a factor in the story. So there's that to look forward to. And speaking of looking forward, the show itself was originally airing. The first 3 seasons have aired on Sci-Fi, and Sci-Fi canceled it. And I seem to think it wasn't because of ratings, but that the producers had certain conditions for distribution rights that they were insisting on, because the show is pretty successful and there's a lot of money to be made. I think that's what, and so Sci-Fi canceled it, and the fans went nuts. And begging Netflix and Amazon and others to pick it up. They even flew a banner over like Amazon's headquarters. Please save The Expanse,
really?
Jeff Bezos. Like it was like they did a crowdfunding, and then Jeff Bezos was at some space conference because he's big into like he owns a Blue Origin. It's called. It's
Blue
one
Origin,
of these private space companies. Because if you're a billionaire these days, that's what you do. And excuse me, he was at this conference and announced that Amazon was picking it up, the show, and to great applause. And Jeff Bezos is now everybody's hero, which is good for Jeff. So that we've got a fourth season to look forward to. One last little personal anecdote. As I was reading, I think it's the fourth book, Cibola Burn. Now I'd have to look. Yes, I think it's Cibola Burn. A character gets introduced by the name, I think it's Murphy, but don't hold me to that. He and as I'm reading the book, I'm thinking, this is Clancy Brown, like the actor Clancy Brown. If you haven't seen him, go look him up on IMDb. As soon as you see his picture, you'll recognize him. He's been in everything. He was in Highlander as the in other things since then. And so I tweeted basically that if the producers of The Expanse, when they get to that season, if they don't hire Clancy Brown, I'm going to be really upset. And then they tweeted back at me, "Hey, what are you, his agent?" And I said, "No, but really, the way you wrote this character, it's Clancy Brown. So if Clancy Brown plays that character in that season, you can thank me."
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So just a little personal anecdote. So
Nice.
I'm sorry that we lost Steve. I think he's trying to join us back again just in time for us to wrap things up. But unless you have anything left, Steve, welcome back. I was just telling folks that your computer keeps dropping you. But I just wanted to kind of I just mentioned that the sci-fi it's switching from sci-fi to Amazon, and how I'm going to be responsible for Clancy Brown being cast as one of the characters in I think it's the 5th or 6th season. So you can thank me. I'll tell you about that later. But is there anything left that we haven't really covered that we should mention here in this last minute or two?
I encourage people to read the books if they haven't. Like I said, I've never read a sci-fi series with this many books in it.
Yeah.
And they're not hard to read. And every once in a while I'll get bored and then I'll come back to it like, oh yeah, this is really great. So it's a nice element if you enjoy the show.
Yeah.
I just picked up the first 3 on in a box set on Amazon. It was pretty inexpensive, so I'm looking forward to actually diving into the books.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll try to find a link to that box set, put it in the show notes for folks if they want to do that. And if you buy it through the link, you'll help support SQPN in our mission with a couple of the pennies that Amazon will throw our way. So I encourage you to do that. So I guess that's it from us. So I want to encourage the listeners. What did you think of these first 3 seasons of The Expanse and what we had to say about it? What did we miss? What did we get wrong? We want to hear from you. Let us know by visiting sqpn.com/secrets and then find this, the link for this show there. Leave us a comment there or go to the SQPN Facebook page. Leave us some feedback there. Or you can send us an email to secrets@sqpn.com. And, if you give us some feedback, we might discuss it on a future episode of the Secrets in Movies and TV. You can find links to our personal websites or anything the books that we're going to put on there on our show notes on sqpn.com. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast feed to ensure you receive all the future installments of the Secrets of Movies and TV shows. Coming up, we're going to do the Secrets of Coco, the Disney Pixar animated movie. We're going to be doing that coming up next week, and that don't miss that. That's sure to be a good one. And we've got others that we've done recently, I want to continue on. We did Secrets of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I plan on doing Secrets of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Last Crusade. but I'm not doing Crystal Skull.
Good for you.
If they come out with when Indiana Jones 5 comes out, we'll do that. But we're going to stop at Last Crusade. So please subscribe to the podcast feed. Share it with other people if you can, please. And really, one big thing that really helps is if you go to iTunes and you leave a review, give us 5 stars and leave us a written review. That actually triggers the algorithms in Apple's iTunes computers to show our podcast to more people, grows the audience, and helps SQPN continue to grow and to bring these shows to you. We have other shows that we want to encourage you to check out: Secrets of Doctor Who, Secrets of Star Trek, Let's Talk, The Pilgrim Life. We have a lot of great shows and we got more on the way. So I encourage you to check it out. So until next time, Father Gossett, thank you for sharing in the Secrets of the Expanse.
Thank you for letting me talk about a great show.
And Steve Nelson, thank you as well. Despite any technical difficulties, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
And once again, I'm Don Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Movies and TV Shows.